A theory confirmed, a corpse bride, and the tallest waterfall in the world. Severance is back with its fourth episode of its second season, and it was a real mind bender, and we're going to do our best to try to process through this shit. Welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. I'm Corey, that's Shane, or maybe I'm Shane and he's Corey. I don't know, because nothing is as it seems on this
We're
show.
actually twins.
Yes. Oh man, but which one is the fervent masturbator? Who knows? Stay tuned to find out. In this episode, we're going to try to break down this episode of Severance as best as we can. Share some theories along the way. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Big thanks to everyone who has found us because of this show. It's been a lot of fun talking about it. Shane, I don't even know. I
What
usually
just
hand this to
happened?
you. Yeah, what is going on? I'm going to lead off actually, and I'm going to say something that's non-spoiler. This is my favorite episode of the series so far by a long shot.
Yeah, I mean we've said this in other shows too, where the like off the wall weird episodes are the ones that we really gravitate towards
Yep.
because it's just so like I've never seen an episode of television like this in
Yep.
any other show, right? And I think that the weirdness was amplified, but we also got a lot of story progression too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think that was a great marriage. And then John Turturro, man, just fantastic in this episode. Like Emmy type shit that he was
I was going to
doing.
say the expression people have been using online is they're already engraving the Emmy, right? Like
Yeah,
they're putting
he
his
is.
name on it.
He
So
was fantastic in this episode.
yeah. So wow. Yeah. Spoilers ahoy. Let's take this one out of the station. I'm gonna pass it to
Yeah.
you, and we'll
Let,
go beat by beat.
all right, let's dive right in. So we start with Irving in the middle of a frozen lake, which initially I thought was like, oh, cold harbor, but not really a harbor, more of a lake. And we
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
out that they're actually kind of in that Cure painting from the prior episodes,
Mm.
where he's
Good
overlooking
catch.
the river or whatever. That's the like DVD menu or whatever on the TV. But then
Man.
he eventually reunites with Mark Dillon and Helly.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
We'll talk.
it. But they go to the top of the mountain and they watch this Stranger Things esque 80s type DVD VHS recording thing of
Yeah.
Mr. Milchick explaining that they are on a retreat. They are
Mhm.
in the outdoor retreat team building occurrence, otherwise known as ORTBO.
Don't get
This
that
is
wrong.
another, yes, this is another acronym that I will get wrong somehow. Last week I called O&D what did I
OCR?
OLC or
I think
OCR
OCR is what you called
which
it.
was some phantom amalgamation of acronyms that I have in my head, but O&D is the correct acronym. But anyways, in this case, it is
Ortbo.
ORTBO, which is great. They just describe it as ORTBO a few times. But
Yeah.
anytime you ever go anywhere for work from now on, just call it an ORTBO.
I have a work trip in 2.5 days.
Just call it ORTBO.
I have an Ortbo out in Denver, which is a really cold
It might
place.
be as cold.
I might die. My Florida blood will not be able to handle that.
Yes.
Shane, have you ever gone on a work retreat? Not like a work trip to a conference or whatever, but one where it's like team building kind of thing?
Not really team building. We went to Amsterdam for a work conference. That was team building, I guess. And
Yeah. Nothing ever goes as planned.
no, it's true. It's
Which
true.
this episode is perfect in that regard because
Yes.
in the real world, there's always something that happens that throws the team building exercise off the rails.
Yep.
And this just, in its own weird way, illustrated that, which I thought
Yeah,
was great.
that's true. That's true. Again, the workplace commentary.
Yeah,
While this is also just some crazy nonsense, but
there is a theme
I love
here.
it. Yes, yes. But so in the video, Mr. Milchick explains that they are in Dieter Egan National Forest,
Mhm.
to which Dylan replies, "Dieter Egan." And then Milchick has a pause and then says,
Dude,
"Dieter Egan, I'm glad you asked." He
you might be
explains that.
pining to know
Yeah, oh,
internally who Dieter
yes.
is.
Yes, pining. I like the choice of phrase there because
So
they're in a
good.
forest. But anyways, he explains that they must go to Scissor Cave, which there's so much sexual innuendo in
Oh
this
yeah.
show, and like Scissor Cave, come on,
Yep.
which is where he tamed the four tempers, and they must get the book titled "The Fourth Appendix."
Yeah,
Uh, so they do that, and
they do.
before they do that, they encounter a weird CGI AI atrocity of Mark pointing the way
Yep.
to the cave. So as they go, more and more of these weird, creepy CGI versions of them pop up.
Yep.
Really unsettling type visuals there.
Yeah.
They could have just recorded them, but it's like this like uncanny valley, like
Mhm.
Tarkin from Rogue One type CGI thing.
Yeah. I watched the credits, mostly because the music that hit at the end of the episode was
Yeah.
just delightful after everything that happened. And they named all of those characters as the shadow versions of each of those. So it was
Ah,
Shadow Mark, Shadow Helly, Shadow
gotcha.
Dylan, and Shadow Irving, which
Got it.
uh creepy. Very, very
Yeah.
creepy. It almost felt like Jordan Peele's Us. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
okay. There's some more Jordan Peele. Like in the last episode, we said that the woman talking to the board, whose name escapes me right now,
Natalie.
um, yes, Natalie, thank you. She reminded me of the Get Out scene
Hmm.
with the creepy face.
Yeah.
Same thing here. Like there's a lot of like horror influence, and I really enjoyed that.
We need to ask Ben
Um,
Stiller on Twitter if he's a Jordan Peele fan.
yeah, surely,
I'm
right?
sure the answer is yes, but
Yes. But anyways, they get to Scissor Cave and they stumble upon the book with the giant 4 Roman
yep,
numeral on it, and
yep.
they start reading from it. And essentially, Kier or Dieter is Kier's twin brother,
Uh-huh.
and he jacks off in a forest
Yeah,
while Kier watches.
but the
So
way that they
yeah,
explain that, though,
it's the
they
most
said it in a much
eloquent.
more eloquent way.
Yes,
He deposited his seed on the
yes,
landscape
upon
or
the
something.
soil, and
Yeah,
yes, with every thrust, the music of the forest, the wind, so good.
yeah.
Uh,
It's a really
and
strange
it's
thing.
it's great because you don't like you think it's leaning that way as you're hearing them say the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
story, and then at the end, it's like, oh yeah, that is what they're talking about.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, that was great. Um, so then on their way, onward, uh, Irving is talking to Mark, and you can tell he's suspicious of
Uh-huh.
Helly. Saying like, I don't believe her. What are you talking about?" And this is planting the seeds. We knew this from the prior episodes that the night gardener thing really clicked with him, and then
Hmm.
in
Big time.
the prior episode before this, where she kind of touches his arm, and Irving's like, Helly wouldn't do that, and so
Hmm.
he's suspicious, right? And so
Yep.
he's feeling out eventually what is to come. Um, but then they happen upon this like Lord Voldemort type blob thing, like in the end of Deathly Hollows. I'm making just ridiculous references now, but it's just this blob thing. And what I found interesting was that Irving's immediate um, inkling was to eat it,
Yeah.
which makes me think that Irving in the real world is sort of a naturalist, which we've kind of gotten hints at, right? You
Hmm.
knew that like there's either his father was in the military or something
Yep.
related to the military in his flashback or his Audi scenes in season one. But him immediately saying "let's eat it," that makes me think that like he's like a hardened adventure man or something
Hmm.
like that
Yeah.
in the outside world. And we've kind of gotten hints at there being more plot to him on the outside world too.
Yeah.
So uh, more proof of that, I think.
Yeah. And it turns out that that blob was a seal.
I don't think it was a seal, but they
That's what
called it a
Mark
seal.
Mark called it, a seal. I thought it looked like a pig when I first saw it, but I
Could it have been the melted brother thing?
maybe.
Right?
Sure, why not?
Sure,
Who cares?
maybe. But yeah, something going on. It almost reminds me of like the polar bear in Lost, where it's just like, why is this random polar bear here? It's like that. Why is there a seal here?
Yeah, pretty strange, but
But there are seals in harbors, right?
yeah, yeah.
So maybe a cold harbor sort of reference there.
A frozen
Um,
seal. Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
don't know, but I don't know if we'll ever find that out. Like some of this stuff in shows, they just will never explain. It's just a
Well,
weird thing.
especially in the super weird episodes like this,
Yeah, that are so
where
removed
everything
from
kind of
everything
just
else.
feels like a fever dream anyways, they
Yeah,
sometimes they don't even ever touch on it.
yeah.
So,
So we'll see if we get more of that later. But then Milchick finally appears and explains that the waterfall that they have happened upon is the tallest waterfall in the world, which is obviously not true, but to them, I guess it's amazing.
It's the probably
Uh,
the first or second waterfall they've ever seen, right? I
yeah,
mean,
right,
so
right.
there you
And
go.
so you can tell Milchick is disappointed though, because they're not like oohing and awing over this
Right.
waterfall. They're just like over it. They're just hungry, right?
Yep.
So then they go up to camp and they meet up with Miss Huang,
Uh-huh.
who is it's just so weird that they're, she's like playing music at some point, I think, with something, or
Yeah.
what was she doing? Was that
That
music in the score, or was she playing that?
she was playing that.
Okay.
That is a type of instrument that the name is I'm lost on the name right now, but they used it in the score for Loki season 1 and 2.
Oh,
All
okay.
that weird little
Yeah.
sci-fi type music. They use it a lot in Doctor Who also.
Okay.
So it is
Huh.
actually an instrument. It's just a very
Okay.
odd one,
Yeah.
which fits this show
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah, that's perfect. Huh.
Yeah.
See, this is why you're on the show, for the musical references, because
Yeah.
I know you're a music background.
Five years of
Um,
music school, and
yes.
I spit out random facts about instruments that I can't name on YouTube. Anyway,
Yeah, that's why you're watching this show, right? For instruments we can't name.
oh man,
But anyways, they are Milchick is, describing the story to them again, and essentially the ending of the story is that the brother melts in the water and dies, and then Kier encounters this zombie bride thing called Woe,
whoa!
which
Which is
is
one
one
of
of
the four
the four
tempers.
tempers,
Yeah, yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Uh, and it's this creepy zombie bride thing, which we'll come back to later.
Yes, we will.
But in this scene, Helly Helly starts laughing, which actually in this scene made me kind of think like maybe it's Helly, but like the whole time I was thinking like, we've had too much evidence to the contrary. Like it's got
Sure.
to be Helena, but like this is such a Helly thing to do that I was actually somewhat surprised by it. Like Helly
Yeah.
would totally laugh at
Right.
that story.
But that's one of a couple of things that happens in this episode where when you think about it from the perspective of that's probably Helena in there, it's her getting to let loose, which she
Yeah,
normally can't do in
correct.
her life, right?
Yes.
So at first it's like, oh wait, maybe no, and it's just like a thing to throw you off the scent. But
Hmm.
like she's getting to live life in a way that she never has before,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense, which is kind of
Yeah, and it
in a
also
sick
makes me
twisted way.
think that these stories are not told on the outside world. Maybe they're like just told to the innies, and like she's laughing hysterically because it's like a bedtime story that they're telling
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
children kind of thing.
Because the other three are like wide-eyed and
Yeah.
like really enamored by the story.
Yeah.
And they
So
don't start laughing about it until she starts making them realize, guys, this is fucking ridiculous. Like
yes. Yeah, so I'm thinking
yeah,
there's something to that where the Audis, and we already know that the Audis see the innies as like lesser humans,
sure.
children type of
Mhm.
thing. So it's
Yep.
almost like she's finally experiencing what the innies experience, and she's just like, this is fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And so, pretty interesting. But Irving immediately perks up and says, this is not funny, and Milchek is not impressed by the laughing either, and
No,
makes
no, he's not.
makes Miss Huang burn all the marshmallows.
Those poor marshmallows, man.
They
Just
were so
completely went to waste.
the Cure marshmallows, Cure s'mores.
And they were weird because marshmallows usually have like some form of rounded edge to them.
Yeah, they were
And those
square,
ones were like
thick
perfectly
marshmallows.
square. They almost looked
Yeah,
like white chocolate fudge,
yeah.
which was just kind of weird to me.
It was a
But
little bit
with this show,
appetizing. Yeah.
everything's weird about this show.
Yes. But Irving also calls out Mark for siding with Helly and saying you're using your pupils to make love to her.
Goo goo
Which
eyes.
was that's a line, right? Using your pupils.
Yeah. And I
But
mean, and then
yes,
there's the layman's version of it, which is goo goo eyes.
correct. Yeah, which Mark will uh, later repeat. But yeah, then Mark goes to Helly's tent and they have sex,
Little bound
which
chicka bow wow.
we finally got a Severance sex scene, which I did not think we would get this early. Like we're really accelerating the timeline of things.
I saw something online over the past week, though, where people were saying everything that you think this show is going to hold back on,
Yeah,
they're doing it, and the pedal is just to the floor, and they
yeah,
don't care. And I
yep,
love that. I think that's
yeah,
great because a lot of that stuff is like, okay, yeah, we expect it. Like the reintegration thing last week,
yep,
you knew it was going to happen at some point, but you
yep,
usually think maybe penultimate episode of the season, season finale, something like that. they're like, nah, season episode 3 out of 10. We're just doing that, and
Yep.
then off to the races with the next thing. So
Yeah. And so I'll split these next two scenes, but we'll talk about Mark and Helly first.
mhm.
They have sex, and in the middle of it, he starts the reintegration process. I
Yeah,
think this is happening at the same
okay.
time, kind of when he's being reintegrated in the outside world, and so it's starting to flicker back and forth. He
Mhm.
sees, and that was a really cool shot too, of Gemma and Helly
Mhm.
switching back and forth.
Yep.
That was pretty trippy. But then, they have this scene where Helly explains that she was ashamed of who she was on the outside, and
Mhm.
she was scared. And he says, it doesn't matter who you are on the outside; it matters.
Yeah.
I don't care about that because I care about who you are here.
Yeah. The interesting thing that happens there too is he asks her. He says, "Well, who are you out there?"
Yeah,
And then there's a long, awkward silence. And instead of just waiting that couple seconds extra to find out from her, he's like, "No, no, no, it's okay. I don't care. Whoever
yeah,
you are,
yep,
who you are here is who I care about."
yep, yep,
It's like, oh, you were so close to finding
yeah,
out, and then she
yep.
doesn't give it away. So
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Great scene. But at the same time, Irving is exploring through the forest. I'm not
yeah.
exactly sure what he was trying to do there, but he is, shouting for Mr. Milchek, going out into the forest, and he hits his head and extinguishes his um, torch, and then falls asleep on a rock.
Yep.
And then he wakes up in his work clothes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's like flies all over his desk. And he
Hmm.
goes and sees crazy numbers and pictures appearing. His file is called Montauk, which I
Montauk. Yeah.
believe is a Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind reference.
Oh,
That's
fun.
a very, they go to Montauk in that movie, and it's a
Okay.
very heavy inspiration for what the show is trying to do. So that I think that was
Yeah.
a clear
The
reference to that movie.
the only numbers that were on his screen were 7, 1, 4, and 5.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know what
noticed
that
that too.
means,
I
but
did notice that as
uh,
well.
but it transformed into Egan. It started to transition into
Yeah,
Egan. So there's probably something in there. Let us know in the comments if you figured that out. We record
yeah,
these immediately after the episode's over, and we've had no time to process it. So definitely let us know. But one thing during because these are cross cut, these two
yep,
scenes, the sex scene
yep.
and then Irving's little trip that he has, uh, the lighting and color choices were fucking fantastic in this.
There was a transition. Go ahead.
The whole time that Irving is on screen, it's blue
Mhm.
and it's cold. And it's not
Yep,
just cold where he is, it's cold in here because he's
yep,
filled with loneliness.
yep.
And then they're cross-cutting that with the key light source being the space heater that's in the tent, which creates like an orangey reddish, like warm, lush, the throes of young love, right? Which Mark and Helly are experiencing, or Helena or whoever it is, right? And just the going back and forth between that, I thought it was just masterfully done.
Yeah.
It was so cool. It was such a juxtaposition between where those three individuals are in their life at this point. It's just beautiful, and nothing on TV I think is doing stuff like that right now, other than the show.
There was one really trippy, transition where he was walking through, and then their, like, hands come
Hmm.
over the left side, and it
Yeah,
was
because I
like,
think he's
"What?
walking through
Is
the
there
forest,
someone
right?
behind them? Oh, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
them in bed." But yeah. So then he sees Bert, and then he sees the whoa, zombie bride thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which
Corpse Bride.
was terrifying.
Hmm.
But I found this really interesting that, I don't know if it's more of a dream or kind of referencing something, or trying to make a greater point. But then he wakes up. It was a nightmare.
Hmm.
And he kind of immediately knows what to do in this instance. And
Yeah.
this gave him some clarity, right? And the way I'm thinking about it is he kind of sees Egan in the numbers, and like it's the epiphany for
Hmm.
him,
Yep.
that's who Helly has to be, right? So then,
Yep.
of course, we cut to the confrontation at the waterfall. Mark and Milchek and Dylan are trying to find Helly and Irving because they're missing, and Irving confronts Helly, and he has deduced the entire thing, that Helly is not Helly R. Helly is Helena, the Audi Egan.
Yep.
mainly because of how cruel she was. And
Hmm.
Helly was never a cruel person. She had her quirks and can be a bit crazy at times, but she was never mean.
Right.
And so when Helena was mean, that was his final giveaway that this is Helena, it's not Helly. And so he starts to drown her. But
A
this
little
is
bit, a
all part of
little dramatic.
yeah. It's part of his master plan, though, because he is essentially threatening because he knows it's an Egan, right? Because he says something
Yeah.
around the point of you know how important you have to be on the outside world for them to let you
Hmm.
down here,
Yep.
right? I did find the choice of words interesting too. That he said like, "Why are you down here?" Meaning like, "Why are you down here?" Like with the
Yep.
severed floor, not
Yep.
down here by the waterfall,
At the
which I
bottom of the
thought was
waterfall.
was
Yeah.
good. Correct.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. And then Milchik goes on his walkie-talkie and says to remove the Glasgow block,
Yeah. That's
which is
what he
what
said.
that's called. Interesting. What I don't quite know what that would be a reference to, uh,
I don't know, man.
but if you know in the comments and you've deduced it, I'll think about this for the next couple days to see kind of what comes to me and Google and stuff.
Yeah.
But it could just be they have crazy names for things.
Code
But
for everything. Yeah.
yeah,
But
but
but it seems like
and
there's something that they can trigger in Helena's brain to alter the way things go when she goes down to the severed floor, so that
yeah,
way she can still be herself. And
yeah,
then when he turns that off, she goes back to being Heliar, and she's, with good reason, terrified of
yeah.
what's going on. And oh boy.
Yeah, and the implications of what just happened with the sex scene too. Helly R is not going to remember that.
Yeah.
And it means that Helena kind of like assaulted Mark a little bit with that. So crazy stuff.
And she kind of assaulted her any
Yeah. Yeah.
to a degree, right? Like there's a weird conversation that you can have there. But and then we get uh, what might be the most dramatic firing in the history of any
Yeah.
workplace in history.
Well, it kind of makes sense, right? When you're fired in this world, you die essentially.
Yeah.
You cease to exist, which was a very dramatic ending for Irving, and he earned it too. John
Oh yeah.
Turturro gives that look to Milchek, and it's a fuck you look.
Oh,
I
big time. Yeah.
outsmarted you
Yep.
look, and I don't think it's just that, but because he also calls him by his first name, which
Does.
I don't. Does he know that in the any world?
Well, she yells it. She says,
Oh,
"Seth, don't do it."
got it. And
And he
then he
goes,
repeat.
"Yeah, Seth,
Yes,
do it."
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's him learning that information. I couldn't remember if he had seen that out like from his Audi
Yeah, but
experience in the
the
prior season.
vitriol in which he says it with
Hmm.
is real good. Like Turturro's voice is fantastic,
Oh,
right? Like
he's
it's got
he's
that deep
awesome.
grovel to
Yeah,
it, and just everything he did in that scene was just through the roof, man. It's fantastic.
yeah. But then we get his cut to black, which is his death. But I don't think this is the last that we've seen of Irving. Like I mentioned
No, no,
earlier in
I
this
don't think so.
episode, there's something going on with Audi Irving where he's on to something, and getting the information on the tunnel, the export hall or whatever they call it, export something.
Yeah, yeah, the
Um,
export hall. Yeah,
yeah. So something's going on there, and I feel like he might be the one to break them all out or something like that later
yeah,
in the show. So it's not the last we've seen of him, but it's probably the last that we've seen of his innie. So
yeah.
pretty depressing ending for Irving, but he went out a hero, right?
And he won't have any ceremony, catered or otherwise. As Milchick said, there,
you know, Milchik was so good in this episode.
man, he's
Just
been good in every episode.
yeah,
Dude's
yeah,
crushing it, man.
yeah.
So good. Like
But yeah, this
there's a scene there where right before Irving walks off into the forest as he's told to do, extreme close up, Irving and Milchick. And like I'm thinking to myself, man, you got a powerhouse actor like John Turturro with all this history, and you're just like hanging with him. That's like
hmm
boxing with Mike Tyson in his prime, right? Like,
yeah,
and is it Trammon Tillman? I think is the actor who plays Milchick.
Trammell Tillman.
Trammell Tillman, yeah, it's like just hanging in there
Yeah.
and doing the thing. This is just
And
so
it's
cool, man.
interesting because he was so good in the first season, but he's given so much more to do in
Hmm.
this season because he's
Yeah,
kind of the boss now, and he has just stepped into that role flawlessly.
yeah. I
Because
think
we
that's a
kind of
breakout performance.
feel, yeah, we kind of feel the the absence of Patricia Arquette
Hmm.
as Miss Cobell in that role.
Yeah.
But man, if Trammell Tillman isn't just cooking.
Yeah. Just insane. And with what a mustache. The way that it has like a little tiny curl,
Yeah.
so it's almost like the evil handlebar twisty, but it's not quite twisty enough. I'm probably reading too far into it, but man, so funny. And then the credit music that hit after
Yeah.
the fade to black was
Yeah, the
just
needle
like,
drop there.
but just like smooth, soft
Yep.
elevator jazz
Yep.
after a extremely heavy ending.
Yeah, and
Very
it kinda
Severance.
went back to that TV scene that kind of felt like Stranger Things with the weird music.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did, forget to mention the great line that, Irving gives where he's like, "I don't trust anything Mr. Milchick says, not even televisually."
Televisually, yeah.
Not televisually. It's great.
Yeah.
But man, my thought here is that it's almost like a bottle episode, but there's so much plot in it and character development that it's not.
Yeah.
Uh, but like what I expected was the immediate aftermath of his reintegration from the prior episode.
Mhm.
And in the best TV way possible, it says, no, we're not doing that. We're doing something completely
Oh,
different.
we're gonna
You
make
are
you wait
not going to
another week.
see,
Yeah.
yeah, you are not going to see what happens next yet. Instead, you're going to see this little aside, which was a big reveal, right? And we said for the prior 3 episodes that we thought that Heliar was actually Helena, but we said
Mhm.
specifically that it was not the big twist for the season. It
Yep.
was a twist for the season. And I think they approached it beautifully because
Yeah.
had they dragged this out for the whole season and then the ending reveal is that it's actually Helena, I think we
Mhm.
would have felt a little bit cheated because it was pretty obvious.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I felt like a lot of people would have thought that, like, oh, it's too easy, it's too obvious. Like
Sure.
I've outsmarted the show, but the show it respects its audience and it says we know that you know, and we're going to reveal it when the story needs us to, which
Mhm.
in this case was episode 4. And same thing with the reintegration, right? They could have saved
Mhm.
that for the end. They put it in episode 3 because they understand that we don't want to drag you out for a whole
Yep.
season to give you a little bit of information.
Yeah.
We talked about Silo season 2 on this show as well, and I felt like it's the polar opposite of that. I liked
Very
Silo
much.
season
Yeah.
2, but Silo season 2 was 6 episodes in the middle where not a lot happened because they were stretching it out, and then all the reveals happen in the end.
Yep.
Severance is not interested in that. Severance
Mhm.
is saying, we're going to give you all these reveals when they happen, and we're going to keep moving.
Yep. I
I think it's great.
I was floored by this episode. I thought the direction was outstanding. I
Ben
thought
Stiller again.
the cinematography was fantastic. I thought that the editing, in particular, a lot of the transitions and just the way they used that forest and the icicles and time lapse over the sun with the clouds and everything, like it truly felt like it was something that was removed from this show but still
Hmm.
happened in this show.
Yeah, we didn't get
And
the opening credits.
nope.
It was, a very
Title card. Yeah.
atmospheric type of thing, which I
Yep.
think was great, right?
Yeah.
It felt like a different show, like you said,
Yep.
but it's the same show, and I think that that's TV at its best when you can do something completely off the wall and different, but it still feels familiar.
Mhm.
And maybe that's just a testament to the great actors that we've got in the show that keep us grounded with those characters. That
Yeah.
if you've got that core, you can do whatever you want, and people will stick with it because of those characters, right?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I do have one prediction for next week. Uh, we are going to get the workplace commentary on when the new guy shows up to replace somebody who has left the company. Because
Oh,
now
that's true.
there's only 3 out of the 4. They're going to fill
Yeah,
that position with someone,
I
and
wonder.
every time there's a new person that starts at a company, it's always like a little awkward, right?
Yeah,
And you're kind of feeling that person out to see if you can trust them, if they're going to be cool. Like, there's going to be a ton of that, I think, in next week's episode.
yeah. I also just kind of wonder the immediate aftermath of this, right? Like Helly R is back, but like for how long?
Yeah, and at
You
what
know,
cost,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Is Helena going to never come back? But I don't know. It's going to be a constant fight. But I think where this is going, and Helena's arc is going to be the sympathy, right? Where
Yeah.
she starts out as this hardened Egan person. She's like the worst person in the world, and then she experiences all this stuff. And I think that this episode actually really affected her,
Hmm.
and her outie will see things differently, and
Yeah.
maybe she'll rebel, right? Maybe she is doing what her innie does in season one, but in her outie is doing it in season two, which is rebelling, right? It's
Yeah.
the innate rebellion in her character.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a Grinch Scrooge arc too,
Yeah,
where it's like
yeah.
the person, the evil, never happy or position of power, whatever, gets to see things from the perspective of the other people,
Hmm.
and then has a change of heart because of it. So,
Yeah.
um, I think there was some commentary too on the name Helena being something about a source of light or whatever, and the name Kier being a source of dark, and someone
Hmm.
saying that she could be the light that could you know
Ah,
bring the company out, or save the people that are part of it or whatever. There's a whole lot
interesting.
of those kind of theories floating around on the internet, and you could fall into a Reddit rabbit hole very
Yeah,
quickly.
and I have, for
Yeah,
sure.
which is awesome though, because uh, there aren't a lot of shows right now that stir up that kind of
Yeah,
conversation, and this is one of them, which is great.
yeah, and we appreciate, if there's a detail that we missed, and put it in the comments, let us know. Last week somebody mentioned that the breathing tube we completely missed from season one,
Yep,
which
guilty as
was
charged.
Cobel's, we think her mom's breathing tube potentially, but it was in her cure shrine from season one.
Yep.
And then somebody mentioned that we should read the Lexington letters, which I did. And in that letter, they mentioned that Lumen had issues or like a recall with their feeding or breathing tubes.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's something like Lumen was the cause of her mother's death, or something like that, right? Which is
Yep.
an interesting contrast to her character, because she's seemingly been in this Lumen world her entire life and indoctrinated by it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, maybe they are the source of her pain and suffering.
Yeah, could be
Interesting
both.
stuff.
In a lot of cases, the thing that brings you wealth and stability is also the thing that drives you insane. So
Yeah,
it could be that too. So uh, I am very excited that so much has happened and there's still 6 weeks left.
I know. I
Like,
know. It feels like a full season's worth of content, but we're not even halfway through
not
this.
even halfway, which is
Great.
which is awesome. So, well, cool. I think that's enough. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. As we have mentioned a few times in this episode, if you've got your own theories, if you notice something that we didn't notice, please drop us a comment below and let us know. We love to have that conversation. We'll respond to every comment that comes through. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Shane's going on a cruise. Fancy. So probably won't have another video until next week's Severance episode, unless my lazy ass decides to put something together. Probably won't. So make sure to go back and watch our other Severance videos to get a good laugh as to what we thought would happen. And then the season has obviously zagged when we thought it was going to zig. So make sure to stay tuned for all of our future videos and so much more. And we'll see you guys in the next video.